The secret origin of the decision to annihilate entire cities lay in a humiliating failure that the Allied High Command desperately tried to hide in 19... At the start of the war, the Royal Air Force RAF operated under the precision myth they believe daylight bombing could strike specific industrial targets like oil refineries or ball-bearing factories with surgical accuracy. However, a secret internal investigation, known as the Butt Report, shattered this illusion. It revealed a staggering statistic. Only 1 in 3 aircraft was dropping its bombs within 5 miles of the actual target. On dark, moonless nights over the Ruhr Valley, the RAF wasn't hitting factories, they were hitting empty fields and forests. This secret failure presented Winston Churchill and the Air Ministry with a brutal binary choice: either abandon the strategic air campaign entirely or change the definition of a target. In February 19, the Secret Area Bombing Directive was issued. The mission was no longer to destroy a factory, but to destroy the morale of the industrial workforce by leveling the cities they lived in. This was the birth of the Dehousing theory. Championed by Lord the secret logic was chillingly mathematical. If you could destroy the homes of the workers, the factories would stop functioning regardless of whether the buildings themselves were hit. The war had officially moved from the battlefield to the front door. The man chosen to execute this secret pivot was Air Marshal Arthur Harris, known to history as Bomber Harris. Harris was a technocrat of destruction who had no patience for the sentimental distinctions between soldiers and civilians in a total war. He famously remarked that the Nazis had sowed the wind, and now they were going to reap the whirlwind. Under his command, the RF began to treat German cities as integrated industrial organisms. The secret of Harris's strategy was the saturation attack. The idea that by sending hundreds of bombers simultaneously, they could overwhelm the German night fighter defenses and the city's fire brigades. The first major test of this secret doctrine was the 1,000-bomber raid on Cologne in May 19. For the first time, the world saw the terrifying logistical power of a coordinated air armada. But Cologne was just a rehearsal. The secret evolution of the incendiary bomber mix of magnesium and white phosphorus was designed not to explode, but to ignite. The Allies weren't just dropping explosives anymore, they were dropping fire. The secret realization among the Allied architects of fire was that wood and brick were more vulnerable than steel and concrete. To win the war, they decided to turn the German urban landscape into a self-sustaining furnace. In July 1943, the secret logic of Dehousing reached its most terrifying expression in the city of Hamburg, known as Operation Gomorrah. This campaign was the first time the Allies successfully created a firestorm, a man-made meteorological phenomenon. The secret to this catastrophe was a meticulous layering of munitions. The RAF first dropped massive blockbuster bombs to shatter windows and blow off roof tiles, creating the necessary ventilation for what was to come. Then came the thousands of small, stick-like incendiary bombs. The secret was that the city itself became the fuel. The wooden frames of the medieval city center were the perfect kindling. The firestorm was not an accident. It was a result of cold, atmospheric calculation. As thousands of individual fires merged, they created a massive upward draft of superheated air, reaching temperatures of 800 degrees Celsius. This vacuum sucked in oxygen from the surrounding areas with the force of a hurricane, creating winds of 150 miles per hour. The secret horror of Hamburg was that people were not just killed by flames. They were suffocated as the fire literally consumed the oxygen in their basements, or they were pulled into the vortex of the inferno by the sheer force of the wind. This was the Gomorrah effect, the realization that a city could be turned into a self-consuming furnace. The secret report following the Hamburg raids changed everything for the Allied High Command. They realized that they had found a force multiplier. Instead of hitting a target with 1,000 tons of explosives, they could hit it with 500 tons of incendiaries and let the city's own geography finish the job. The success of Hamburg killing an estimated 40,000 people in a single week, the mathematical justification for the later destruction of Dresden and the eventual firebombing of Tokyo. The secret consensus was established. The moral cost was secondary to the industrial efficiency of the firestorm. However, the secret internal struggle among the Allies was intensifying. while Arthur Harris celebrated the triumph of Hamburg. Some American commanders in the USAAF United States Army Air Forces still clung to the ideal of precision bombing by daylight. This created a secret schism in the air war. The British would burn the cities by night, and the Americans would attempt to hit the factories by day. But as the war dragged into 1944, the line between these two strategies began to blur. The Americans realized that the precision they promised was impossible in the clouded skies of Europe, and they began to adopt the secret, brutal math of their British counterparts. The stage was set for the total annihilation of the German and Japanese urban landscapes. By February 1945, the secret objective of the Allied air campaign had shifted once again. Germany was already a broken nation. Its industry was in tatters, and its armies were retreating on all fronts. However, the secret consensus in the war rooms of London and Washington was that a final, overwhelming psychological blow was needed to force an immediate surrender and to demonstrate Allied power to the advancing Soviet Red Army. This was the secret motivation behind Operation Thunderclap, and its primary target was Dresden, a city known more for its Baroque architecture and porcelain than its military industry. The secret tragedy of Dresden was that it had become a massive, open-air refugee camp. Hundreds of thousands of civilians fleeing the Soviet advance in the east had flooded into the city, believing it to be safe because it lacked significant heavy industry. The Allied planners knew this. The secret of the Dresden raid was not the destruction of a specific factory, but the creation of a logistical bottleneck. By destroying the city's center and its rail hubs, the Allies intended to paralyze the German rear and spread a contagion of terror among the population. The decision was made to apply the Hamburg formula to a city packed with defenseless refugees. The execution was a masterpiece of cold, technical efficiency. On the night of February 13th, the RAF delivered a two-wave attack designed to catch the fire brigades while they were still underground. The secret horror was the double blow. The second wave arrived exactly when the rescue workers and survivors were most exposed. The resulting firestorm was so intense that it reportedly sucked the air out of the lungs of those miles away from the center. The secret internal memos following the raid showed a sudden, chilling realization within the British government. Even Winston Churchill, who had authorized the campaign, began to distance himself from the terror bombing in a secret minute to his chiefs of staff, fearing that the Allies would inherit a total ruin that they would then have to rebuild. The secret legacy of Dresden remains the definitive debate on the necessity of slaughter. While the military command argued that the city was a vital communication hub for the Eastern Front, the secret reality was that the raid served a much darker purpose. It was a signal of unconditional resolve. The Allies had decided that to end the war, they had to be more ruthless than the enemy they were fighting. This secret moral pivot to acceptance of mass civilian death as a legitimate tool of statecraft was the final step on the road to Tokyo and Hiroshima. The genius of air power had successfully replaced the soldier with the incendiary and the battlefield with the bedroom. While the firestorms of Hamburg and Dresden had shocked Europe, the secret war in the Pacific was evolving into a different kind of horror. By 1944, the United States Army Air Forces, USAAF, were struggling with a technical crisis. The high-precision bombing of Japanese factories with the B-29 Super Fortress was a total failure. The secret culprit was the jet stream high-velocity winds that blew American bombs miles off target. The man sent to solve this problem was Major General Curtis LeMay, a cold, cigar-chewing tactician who realized that if he couldn't hit the factory, he would burn the entire city that housed it. LeMay's secret strategy, executed on the night of March 9th, known as Operation Meeting House, was a radical departure from American military doctrine. He ordered his pilots to strip their B-29s of defensive guns to carry more weight and to fly at dangerously low altitudes, only 5,000 feet. The target was the Shitamoshi district of Tokyo, a densely packed area of wooden houses and small workshops. The secret of LeMay's lethality was the M69 Incendiary, a napalm-filled cluster bomb designed specifically to cling to wood and paper. He wasn't just aiming for industrial capacity, he was aiming for the maximum combustible surface area of the Japanese capital. The result was the single deadliest air raid in human history. The secret reality of the Tokyo firebombing was more horrific than even the later atomic strikes. In one night, over 16 square miles of the city would incinerated, and an estimated 100,000 people burned to death in a matter of hours. The heat was so intense that the water in Tokyo's canals reached boiling point, and the air turbulence from the firestorm tossed the giant B-29s like autumn leaves. The secret report sent to Washington was chillingly clinical. The mission was a success because it had achieved a higher kill-per-ton ratio than any previous raid in history. The secret consensus among the architects of the Pacific War shifted that night. LeMay didn't stop at Tokyo. He began a systematic campaign of burnouts across 66 Japanese cities, using secret statistical models. His staff calculated exactly how much incendiary tonnage was required to destroy the productivity of each urban center. By the summer of 1945, before a single nuclear weapon was deployed, nearly half of the total area of Japan's major cities had been reduced to ash. The secret of the end of the war was that the decision to destroy thousands had become a routine industrial process, a cold math of fire and wood that made the atomic bomb seem, to the military planners, like a natural and efficient progression of a strategy already in motion. By the spring of 1945, the secret machinery of the Manhattan Project had reached its industrial zenith, while the B-29s were systematically turning Japanese wood and paper into ash. A secret group of scientists and generals, known as the Target Committee, was meeting in Washington and Los Alamos. Their objective was not merely to find a military target, but to find a laboratory city, an urban area that had remained relatively untouched by previous firebombing, so that the effects of a single atomic weapon could be measured with scientific precision. This was the secret, cold reality of the nuclear age. The first victims were chosen based on their pristine state of survival. The secret logistics behind the atomic bomb were staggering. The project consumed more electricity and industrial resources than the entire US automobile industry. But the secret debate was strategic. Why use it? By July 1945, Japan's navy was at the bottom of the ocean and its cities were burning. Oh Weber. The secret consensus among the Allied leaders at the Potsdam Conference was that the shock value of a single bomb destroying a city was necessary to bypass the fanatical Ketsugo defense plan of the Japanese military. The secret fear was not that the bomb wouldn't work, but that the war would end through conventional firebombing before the diplomatic power of the atomic weapon could be demonstrated to the world and specifically to Joseph Stalin. Hiroshima was selected as the primary target for its secret topographical features. Surrounded by hills, the city would act as a pressure cooker, focusing the blast wave and magnifying the destruction. The secret of August 6th, 19 was the efficiency of a single B-29, the Enola Gay, achieved in seconds what it had taken 1,000 bombers to do in Hamburg or Tokyo. The secret report from the Manhattan District analysts focused on total lethality zone, a radius of 1 mile, where everything was vaporized. The Allies had successfully moved from the logistics of fire to the logistics of the sun. The decision to drop the second bomb on Nagasaki only 3 days later remains one of the most guarded secret controversies of the war. The secret military justification was that it proved the United States had an endless assembly line of atomic weapons, even though they only had 2 ready at the time. Nagasaki, a city of steep valleys and ancient cathedrals, was the second laboratory. The secret conclusion of the architects of fire was reached. The war would end, not through a grand invasion, but through a series of technical executions. The Allies had decided that the lives of hundreds of thousands of Japanese civilians were a necessary currency to save millions of American and Japanese lives that would be lost in a ground invasion. It was the ultimate, horrific expression of the cold math of total war. One of the most profound and secret drivers behind the Allied decision to continue the mass bombing was the sheer industrial momentum of the war machine. By 1944, the United States and Great Britain had invested billions of dollars into the production of heavy bombers and the training of hundreds of thousands of airmen. The secret reality of the war room was that these programs had to be justified. If the B-29 or the Lancaster fleet sat idle, the political fallout back home would be catastrophic. The secret of total war was that it had become a business of destruction where the return on investmentaro was measured in the acreage of burnt cities. The Manhattan Project was the ultimate example of this secret economic pressure, with a cost of over $2 billion. An astronomical sum at the time, the project was a massive political gamble. The secret fear among figures like James Burns and General Leslie Groves was that if the war ended before the bomb could be used, the American public would view the project as a monumental waste of taxpayer money. The secret consensus was that the bomb had to be dropped to prove that the investment had been worth it. The cold math was not just military. It was a cold bureaucratic necessity to show a final product for the most expensive weapon in human history. Furthermore, the secret logistics of the supply chain created a conveyor belt of fire. Once the massive incendiary factories in the United States reached full production capacity, there was a constant, unrelenting flow of napalm and magnesium bombs toward the Pacific. The secret failure of the command was its inability to turn off the machine. Curtis LeMay famously stated that if they hadn't dropped the bombs they had, the logistical backlog would have choked the supply ports. The decision to kill thousands was, in a secret and terrifying sense, a way to clear the warehouses. This economic drive led to a secret target exhaustion. By the summer of there were almost no cities left in Japan large enough to justify a mass beat. The secret struggle of the Target Committee was to keep finding places to burn. This industrial momentum created a sunk cost fallacy on a global scale. The Allies had spent so much money and lost so many men perfecting the art of urban destruction that they felt compelled to use it until the very moment of the Japanese surrender, even when the strategic necessity had long since passed. The war was no longer being fought by men alone, but by a self-sustaining industrial engine that demanded more targets. Behind the terrifying statistics of the Tokyo firebombing lay a secret and meticulously planned scientific endeavor conducted in the remote desert of Utah. In 1943, the U.S. Chemical Warfare Service built what was known as the Japanese Village at the WWII Proving Ground. This was not a mere training camp, but a photorealistic laboratory of death. The secret was the level of detail. The Allies brought in prominent architects, including Antonin Raymond, who had lived in Japan, to design traditional makiya houses. These structures used authentic Japanese wood, tatami mats, and sliding shoshi screens to ensure that the thermal conductivity of the test targets perfectly mirrored the residential districts of Tokyo and Osaka. The secret goal of these tests was to perfect the M69 incendiary bomb. The Allied scientists realized that standard high explosives were inefficient against Japanese urban density. They needed a weapon that wouldn't just explode, but would breathe fire into the cramped alleys. The M69 was a masterpiece of lethal engineering, a cluster bomb that released dozens of small bomblets on ribbons. Upon impact, a timed fuse ignited a magnesium charge, which then ejected a sock filled with napalm-thickened gasoline. This secret gel was designed to stick to vertical surfaces and burn with an intensity that could not be extinguished by water. The WWII experiments proved that a specific pattern of dropping these bombs could create a self-sustaining conflagration that no fire department on Earth could stop. The secret collaboration between military planners and civilian fire protection experts was another dark chapter in this development. The Allies recruited the National Fire Protection Association to analyze which German and Japanese city centers had the highest combustibility index. They looked at street width, wind patterns, and building materials to rank cities not by their military value, but by their potential to host a firestorm. This was the secret birth of predictive destruction. A cold, data-driven approach that turned architecture into a liability. The architects of these cities had designed them for life and community, but the Allied scientists re-evaluated them as nothing more than stacked piles of thermal energy waiting for a spark. The secret success of the M69 at WWII gave the military the confidence to abandon daylight precision bombing. They knew, through their desert data, that they didn't need to hit a factory's power plant to stop production. If they could ignite the surrounding 3 square miles of worker housing, the factory would be neutralized by the death or displacement of its entire workforce. This secret shift from targeting the machine to targeting the human was the ultimate moral crossing. The Utah desert was the silent witness to the fact that the firestorms of 1945 were not a desperate response to a long war, but a pre-calculated scientific certainty, perfected years before the first B-29 took off for Tokyo. The decision to kill thousands of civilians presented a secret and profound political challenge for the leaders of the United States and Great Britain. In a democratic society, the government must justify its actions to a public that believes in the rules of war. To bridge the gap between the moral ideals of the Allies and the charred reality of the firestorms, a secret campaign of linguistic camouflage was initiated. The Air Ministry and the War Department began using technical euphemisms to mask the massacre. They didn't call it mass murder or terror bombing, dissect, area bombing, strategic pressure, or dehousing. These terms were designed to turn the destruction of human lives into a clinical, bureaucratic exercise in urban planning. The secret of this propaganda was the focus on the machine. While Allied newsreels showed the heroic pilots and the majestic formations of B-17s and Lank, they rarely showed the results on the ground. The secret directive was to emphasize industrial targets, even when the entire city center had been leveled. If a single rail line remained near a burnt residential district, the official report would claim the mission was a success against Nazi communications. This created a secret disconnect in the public mind. People believed they were supporting a surgical strike against a monster, while in reality, they were funding the systematic incineration of elderly people, women, and children. The secret moral shield was also reinforced by the concept of collective guilt. Allied propaganda, directed by secret committees, began to portray every German and Japanese citizen as a cog in the enemy's war machine. By claiming that every worker in a cottage industry was a legitimate combatant, the Allies could technically justify the destruction of their homes. This was the secret birth of the total warrior concept, the idea that in a modern industrial war, there are no civilians. This psychological shift allowed the Allied pilots to pull the bomb release without the weight of guilt, believing they were not killing people, but neutralizing enemy units. However, the secret internal memos revealed that the leadership was deeply concerned about how history would judge them. After the Dresden raid, the secret tension between the military and the political wings of the British government reached a breaking point. Churchill's secret minute on March 28th was a desperate attempt to pivot the narrative, questioning if the bombing of German cities for the sake of increasing terror was a wise strategy for the post-war reconstruction of Europe. This secret admission that the goal was indeed terror was quickly suppressed. The camouflage of conscience had to remain intact until the final surrender, ensuring that the Allied crusade remained untainted by the soot of the firestorms. As the spring of 1945 arrived, the secret strategic objective of the Allied air campaign underwent a final, cold transformation. The defeat of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan was no longer a question of if, but when. In this terminal phase, the massive firestorms over cities like Dresden and the atomic flashes over Japan served a secret second purpose: atomic and aerial diplomacy. The Allies were no longer just communicating with the enemy. They were communicating with their ally, Joseph Stalin. The secret goal was to demonstrate that the Western powers possessed a technological monopoly on terror that the Red Army, despite its millions of soldiers, could not match. The bombing of Dresden, in particular, carries the secret mark of this geopolitical intimidation. While officially justified as a move to aid the Soviet advance, the secret reality was that Churchill wanted to show Stalin the staggering destructive capacity of the RAF and the USAAF. By leveling a city in the direct path of the Red Army, the Allies were placing a calling card of fire. The secret message was clear: we can destroy any city, anywhere, at any time. This was the secret birth of containment through annihilation. The ruins of the East were not just a graveyard for the Reich. They were the first battleground of the Cold War. In the Pacific, the secret decision to use the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was even more deeply entwined with the Russian factor. The secret of the Manhattan Project was that it was a race against the Soviet clock. Stalin had promised to enter the war against Japan in August, and the American leadership, specifically Secretary of State James Burns, was desperate to end the conflict before the Red Army could claim a stake in the occupation of the Japanese home islands. The secret logic was that 200,000 Japanese lives were a necessary price to ensure that the Pacific remained an American lake. The bombs were dropped not just to force a surrender, but to preempt a Soviet invasion. This secret diplomacy of the sun created a terrifying precedent. It established that mass civilian slaughter was a valid tool for post-war positioning. The secret fallout of this strategy was the immediate escalation of the nuclear arms race. Stalin, seeing the charred remains of the cities the Allies had sacrificed, realized that the Soviet Union was vulnerable. The secret of the firestorms was that they didn't just end one war, they necessitated the next. The architects of fire had successfully intimidated the world, but in doing so, they had locked humanity into a secret cycle of mutual assured destruction. The cities that burned in 1945 were the glowing embers of a peace that was already, secretly, a state of war. The final secret of the Allied bombing campaign is the profound psychological and moral vacuum it left in its wake. When the fires finally went out in August 19, the architects of fire were not met with universal acclaim, but with a complex, secret unease. The men who had flown the missions, the young pilots of the RAF and the USAAF, returned home to a secret struggle. Unlike the soldiers who liberated the concentration camps, the bomber crews had killed from 30,000 feet. They never saw the faces of the thousands who died in the firestorms they created. This distance of death led to a secret, delayed trauma. For many, the realization of what they had done only surfaced decades later, as the precision myth was stripped away by historical truth. The secret legacy of the firestorms was the radical restructuring of international humanitarian law. The devastation of Hiroshima, Dresden, and Tokyo forced the world to realize that the laws of war written in the 19th century were obsolete in the age of industrial slaughter. The secret meetings that led to the Geneva Conventions of 1949 were haunted by the ghosts of the Dehousing theory. For the first time, the international community attempted to create a secret legal barrier against the targeting of civilian populations. The tragedy is that this moral awakening came only after the most densely populated cities of the Axis powers had been reduced to radioactive or charred rubble. The cold math had been proven so effective that the only way to survive it was to attempt to outlaw it. The final question remains the most guarded secret of all. Was it necessary? The secret post-war surveys, such as the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, provided a complex answer, while the bombing undoubtedly crushed the German and Japanese economies. It also revealed that civilian morale was far more resilient than Lord Cherwell or Arthur Harris had predicted. In many cases, the dehousing of workers only made them more dependent on the state, perversely strengthening the grip of the totalitarian regimes. The secret truth is that the war might have ended without the total incineration of these cities. But the Allied leadership had committed themselves to a path of unconditional surrender that left no room for nuance. The secret of the architects of fire is that they were men of their time, trapped in a logic of escalation that they could not or would not stop. They decided that thousands needed to die because they had lost faith in any other way to break the enemy's will. Today, the ruins have been rebuilt, and the firestorms are a distant, grainy memory in archival files. But the secret warning of the secret war files is that the cold math of 1945 is still with us. It remains embedded in our nuclear doctrines and our strategic thinking. The decision to sacrifice the few for the many, or the city for the nation, is a ghost that still walks the corridors of power. The war ended, but the shadows of the firestorms remain, a permanent scar on the conscience of the modern world.